Hi there, and welcome to the Wallace Collection, third floor. We are up here in the Furniture Conservation Studio. And unfortunately, I can't come and can't be there in person this time, but hopefully there will be another time. And I'd like to thank you all and thank particularly to organize this amazing event. I would have loved to be there with you, but that will not happen this time, but you know, maybe in the near future, but hopefully in the near future. The slideshow is going to be quite swift, and it's a thought-provoking PowerPoint. It's all of these things here raised could be extended and much more talked about, but that won't be possible. So please don't quote me out of context. It's all in a very swift presentation style, so to say. But if you got any queries, don't hesitate to get back to me, and we can figure something out. And now, without further ado, I'd like to share my screen and see if that all works. And then I may turn myself off here. There we go. Here we are. Now, first slide you see here is obviously the Wallace Collection. As you know, if you come to London, that's what you're going to see. And it's an amazing building. It was converted between 1872 and 1875 to what you see pretty much here. Victorian architects were absolutely amazing, and so they've done an amazing conversion to this house, ready to house this amazing collection of Richard Wallace. So you see, for example, you can still see here in the windows casing for the awnings. The awnings have been removed, unfortunately, in 1900 or around 1900, we're not sure, but it showed you that they were very much aware of what damage light can cause to objects. And awnings you even find an engraving already in the 18th century. So it's quite interesting to see that you have passive ventilation in Hertford House, you have high ceilings, you've got thermal mass. So everything was done actually to create the perfect environment for our object without costing the earth. And I'm going to go back about that statement a little bit later. Now, as I said, light is obviously an accumulative damaging effect. All light damages, and I just can't stress this enough, because often enough people say they only talk about UV light damages. UV light in the spectra here is a most damaging part of light, but it's not only damaging part of it. It's a most damaging one, but all light damages is accumulative. Next one here is, I show you this one. It's relative humidity and temperature. It's very important again for particular our furniture, and particularly when it comes to wool furniture, because otherwise you may have this here. You have brass, you have turtle shell, and they're all glued together on a carcass between paper, and it all goes and pops up. And we have continuous issue with our wool furniture. But the next two slides, you may want to pause and read them yourself without me going on. But I just want to show these two slides, this one and the next one, because they're an extract of a memorandum from 1917. So already in 1917, they were fully aware of the environmental impact it particularly had on furniture, and particular wool furniture. So it's an absolutely fascinating read. But here you go, I just did an extract here. And so if you can like to read it or translate it, be my guest. Now, what do we do with bull marquetry? Obviously, I said the talk going to be about treatment options. So we use here what is called like of the Shimbabi Technique, which is like a Japanese technique. I just have to look here. And what's really important is this one here, that we actually can accrue back smaller losses here with this kind of a frame construction with wooden dowels, putting them into position, and then we just heat up these soft, they're very soft PVC kind of rubbery glue blocks, which we put in there, and then we put other perspex glue blocks on top of it, which we warm up previously, and also we have a dryer. And the idea is we rehydrate existing glue, we rub in a little bit of water and a bit of glue, and then basically glue that back. Now, anyone who has worked on bull marquetry, it's not that easy, and you have multiple issues here. If the paper gets loose, the paper splits. If it's a collar in it, etc., etc., color can bleach out. So it's not that simple, but it's just to show you one technique we use. Another technique we use is a vacuum clamping technique, which I show you here, basically a drawer or whole piece goes into a plastic bag, and you basically extract all the air in it, and the surrounding air pressure is enough to actually lay that marquetry back again. And again, what is nice, because the plastic is clear, you can see exactly what you're doing, and you heat up certain areas, and you basically go along and warm them up, maybe rehydrate again, and make sure that you can re-adhere all the loose marquetry. It works fantastically well, but again, much more to be said. One has to be careful. It's an incredibly powerful tool. You know, if you don't have here, for example, the plastic sheeting exactly in all corners, you will literally crush your drawer. So, or a carcass, in fact. It's be aware of that. But as I said, the whole talk is about various techniques we use at the Wallace Collection. Here we go, we're taking off this mount, and that's like, it gives you an idea of what this veneer looked like before it was, you know, before it bleached by sun or changed the color through sunlight. So it's very important that this color you see here, it still doesn't represent the original color, yeah? And I just want to stress this again and again, that when you do any research and you take samples or whatever you fancy doing, the surface of most of the marquetry furniture is gone, lost forever. It's been scraped back, varnished, and all that information is gone. So even if you take the veneer off and you look at the back, that gives you a very good idea of what it may look like, but it's not how it looked like. Yeah, very clear, because you have also here, for example, sun shading. You can see very clearly under one of the famous trellis marquetry pattern by Riesen or Urban made similar one. The other cabinet makers did that pattern, but Riesen in particular. And again, you just see how that is, and the sun shading, all of that information is lost. Furthermore, often they are engraved, and the engraving, as you know, is like a V-shaped groove. And as you go along with that tool, you create that V shape, and you fill that with different colored mastic. It doesn't have to be just black or blue. It can be very colorful. We have many examples like that. And as you scrape the surface off, you reduce that V shape, that V groove more and more, and you lose that information. And obviously that color has a real impact. Here, this last image actually is a Chippendale reproduction. Chuck Metcalf, who reproduced that piece, was not so much interested in original dye stuff used, but literally in the color scheme and the original color scheme. So that's pretty true to what it would have been originally. And this image was taken in Newby Hall, which is a fantastic privately owned house, which has amazing boucher tapestry. I mean, they're so colorful, the colors is hardly faded, because they've taken great care of them and actually cover those boucher tapestry for most of the year. That just basically really showed on very rare occasion. They also got Chippendale chairs with original boucher tapestry. It's a real jewel up in Yorkshire. So yeah, if you ever have an opportunity, go up there. And yeah, just to give you the idea of the color. So that was never intended to be in front of the boucher tapestry, but it gives you a very good idea of what it may have looked like in that context. Here we got a chest of drawer by Fiedler, Johann Gottlob Fiedler, and it had a crack here in its side, yeah. And rather replacing like for like, I went along and actually used balsa wood, small section of balsa wood, which I actually fitted in here from the inside, yeah. Because now obviously the wood reaches equilibrium. I couldn't close a gap. That was impossible for many reasons, which I won't go into. But the point is simply, I want to fill that gap and stabilize, because it was actually quite unstable. And I want to give some foundation so I can fill the front of the gap and fill that gap. Now here, to fill that gap in the end, I basically filled with small wall, with balsa wood shavings or balsa wood sawdust mixed with glue, and applied this in here and filled it up with gesso. And gesso is a mixture of chalk and rabbit skin glue essentially. And so it's a completely alien material in a way. So it can easily be distinguished, but it's also easily retreatable. Anyone can treat that at any time without any problem. Yeah. So it's very important to realize that. So here we go. You got a filling here with this marquetry, with the marquetry being still in place. And obviously I could not close the gap within the marquetry panel. That was also a bit of a problem. So you have a distortion which you can't do anything about. But then I basically colored in all of that gesso with watercolors, mainly Van Dyck stain. Van Dyck stain being walnut shavings, nearly darkened or burned, nearly walnut shavings. And basically it's a water-soluble stain which you can apply. It's very light, fast. And I basically painted in over this gesso, but I also used mica powder. I'm a great fan of mica powder. Mica is a mineral. Mica being ground down is a really fine pigment, and it gets like a golden luster, and you can actually apply this as a foundation, so to say, and then you apply your layers on top. And I seal them in with shellac just on this repair. So here you go, gun case, exactly the same method. Again, a piece of wood being inserted here where there was a loss, and then gesso being filled and again colored in to match the surrounding burwood. And that's basically an after shot, and I can absolutely show you can hardly see it. It's completely lost within that piece. We developed that further here, and here, for example, you got the same chest of drawer we had earlier, which had a lot of, which is Boule style marquetry. In this case, I used a lot of horn and mother of pearl and brass and pewter. And here that we had quite a few losses here in the horn losses, which were colored in nicely red. And what we did again, we used again gesso to fill these losses because they're quite substantial. And we didn't want to actually overlay like for like. I'm not a great fan of like for like, if you may have noticed. So here again, we use gesso to fill that in. But furthermore, we actually put like a brightening agent, an optical brightening agent, which fluoresces under UV light and then becomes visible in the visible light spectra. So it's an amazing material called Apex Invisible Blue S. And yeah, it's used in detergent, for example, to make your colors look even brighter. So when you shine UV light on it, that is the fluorescence you get. It's amazing. And that's basically with normal daylight. So you can barely see our repair. I just noticed now, actually, I'm here as my wife, Miss Zoe Allen. But yeah, I think you all know that's not her talking. Here it's another table we did that where that advantage becomes even more prominent because there is a gilt wood table, so it's a wooden base with gesso and gilding on top, and they're actually to be able to differentiate between the old gesso and the new gesso with this brightening agent. It works a treat, and you can see instantly where your repair are, and yeah, I like it. Technique was developed solely by Michael Cox, who did his MA on it. And basically he was an intern here at the Wallace Collection. And I was so impressed that I could convince other stakeholders here to actually try it on various pieces of furniture. And we use it still today. It's nice. Here, another technique is CO2 cleaning, which I'm very fond of. I saw that first when I gave a paper in 2012 in Munich. And someone else gave a paper, and like often at these conferences, you meet with colleagues and lots of discussions, fantastic. And there was a paper presented by Peter Kopp from Vienna. I had a lot of experience with dry ice cleaning, and I was so taken by it. I said, well, actually, Peter, would you like to come to London and demonstrate that? And so he did that straight away. And so in a few years later, we could actually use that technique he discussed with me at the time. And here you can see that what is interesting, it's a company logo which has been printed simply on a piece of paper. And we went over with that CO2 blasted, often referred to as plaster, but it sounds very dramatic. And you can blast with dry ice. I mean, believe me, there are pellets and it can cause terrible damage, no question about that. But what we did, it's a particular machine which called a microjet, which takes a block of CO2 block and shaves off very tiniest amount of CO2. And all you do, you actually transport them with air with very low pressure, like a half a bar, onto the surface. And that's where basically it quick freezes the material, it explodes, yeah. And it takes everything off you want to have taken off in shortest amount of time without harming the original, if applied correctly, obviously. But as I said, it's just something to show. And in this case, we actually took all the ink off that paper without damaging the paper. There was no moisture introduced, nothing. It was just absolutely straightforward. And so we went to this one, and we cleaned here the feet of this chest of drawer you saw earlier. And it's basically all of that dirt is made out of waxes, of varnish, of floor waxes, of dirt and grime, general accumulated dust over some 80 years. And so that's basically one without being cleaned. Here has been cleaned. It was incredibly quick, and the alternative would have been hot air gun. Obviously, I could have done this with a hot air gun. It would have stunk to high heaven, would have been really, really awful. Even with extractor, I mean, it has to go somewhere. Yeah, even if you extract it, it goes somewhere. If you don't have expensive carbon filters. And the other thing is you still need solvent to clean it, to literally decrease it, because you won't get it all off with a hot air gun. And with the dry ice cleaner, you get it all off without any residue, all the varnish, all what you want to take off, all of this gunk is literally debris. You can literally hoover up, and you've got a hoover running there anyway. And so that was basically done, and then you can dispose of it. So it's a very nice, neat technique to be considered. Another thing I use very often are very powerful magnets, and I always have a set of very powerful magnets, magnification, and a good torch with me if I investigate furniture, because that you don't need much more for the beginning. And you basically look and you observe and you really try to take it all in. And here the magnet here gave me some indication that there's something going on. Obviously, after I realized, oh, I think these feet have been extended. Now, how have they been extended? Because the material is very thin, I couldn't see anything else. Magnet, right, there is a big steel dowel in there, or an iron dowel, not necessarily steel, an iron dowel, which was obviously magnetic. And so I could commission an X-ray, and so to just prove what I expected. Because obviously all the X-ray, that cost all money. I can't just go along with that, well, I want to have X, Y, Z. It doesn't work like that. I have to justify the expenses and why it's done. The same here, we had an amazing chest of drawer, which is by Riesner, no shadow of a doubt it's by Riesner, but it's mahogany veneer, and it was always a bit odd, and there are quite a few oddities on it. Again, I can't explain them all, but then, and people expected and suspected that there is something not quite right with it, but couldn't quite put their finger on it. And again, I commissioned an X-ray in the end, and you can see absolutely fantastically well the circle. There's a shadow of the previous trellis marquetry, and it's literally the trellis marquetry you saw in an earlier slide. So, and you can see the pins being inserted, hammered in, and that's what you can still see today. So while the veneer has all been taken off, you can still see traces of the previous work and what was there previously. It also gives you a clue on how it was done. Again, much longer to discuss than I can do here, but yeah, some idea. We also tried CT scanner. We have a very nice hospital nearby, a privately run hospital by a trust, run by a trust, and we a very friendly lot. And they said, oh yes, no, if we have got spare capacity, please bring in your whatever you like to analyze, and we can see what we can do. And so we did that. It's a Portland hospital around the corner from us. So we actually went over there when you have a whole waiting room with patients, and you come along there with bits of furniture. This looked very bizarre, and people look at you like, wow, what's going on? So it's quite funny. Unfortunately, we did that, and it didn't prove a success whatsoever, because there's a mount on it, and we had to leave some mount on. We couldn't take it off. That was the whole idea of trying a CT scan to actually establish how it's being constructed. And because there was metal around it, it created a halo. You couldn't see anything. And on top of that, the definition of the CT scan, while fantastically good for human consumption, so to say, for humans, and to analyze humans, for what the info we were after, it's just not high enough resolution. It's just pretty useless. And in fact, we found out that an analog X-ray brings us much better information than, for example, this CT scan. but it looks fancy, so I thought I would put that in. Here we used what we have to do basically in the end. We had to take marble tops off and take drawers out, and we actually look at these pieces, and we actually look at the detail of these pieces. And so we can actually redraw everything. That's literally a drawing. What you got here is a drawing, but in 3D. So we have all that information, and rather than just being flat piece of paper, we got all the information in a 3D way. And here, for example, we used a photogrammetry technique. Again, a bit like the CT scan, the resolution isn't there yet. Maybe in time, but it's not there yet. It gives you a very good idea, but and we've done lots of work like that. But in fact, manual drawing and wallpapered with high resolution images, that is the way to go. That's what we did. And obviously, if you have all this info, what you can do, I'm just looking what I'm doing for time. Yeah, that's all right. With all that info, we gathered and we drew up. We can make a 3D print, for example. We can 3D print anything what we have now because we got that information. We can laser cut. In this case, we have laser cut our marquetry pattern, much bigger exploded. Simply what we thought for our education department for partially sighted people, but also for children. That was the original idea, but obviously it's great fun to use it anyway. So it gives you an idea. It's a simplified version of the trellis marquetry you saw earlier. It's a section, but you know, if people are partially sighted and they can't appreciate the artwork as we can because we see it, they can actually touch it and they can take it apart, and it gives them a great idea and a great pleasure of how complex these pieces are. Obviously, with all the information there, you also can use a VR headset. You can literally put your VR headset and go in, and you can go walk into furniture. It's incredible. I mean, you can scale it up. You can see exactly what's going on. It's great fun. And if you want to see how it works, go to our recent blog on the Wallace Collection. There's going to be more information updated soon. But if you Google Wallace Collection Riesner, that's where it directs you. We got this now with Sketchfab. A lot of data gathering, but yeah, it's all there. Here, just to give you an idea again of digital reconstruction. So while we can never restore a piece of furniture back to its former glory, we can at least give you an idea of what they may have looked like. It's important when you come to the Wallace Collection. This is our commode 247. That's what you're going to see now, but it had only a few years back, or not a few years, sorry, maybe 100 years, 150 years back, it looked more like this one here. And originally it would have looked like this here, because the plinth is not original. The plinth has been, in fact, extended by quite a bit. And you can only make an assumption about what this piece may have looked like originally, because the information is lost. Yeah, it's like having a hole in a painting. And even if you have seen 800 Canaletto paintings, it means nothing. If you have a painting with a massive hole, what the artist could have put there, it gives you a good idea knowing all the other 800 paintings. And you think, well, but in the end, you still don't know if that really was what was there originally. It's an assumption. And that's with the market. It's a pretty accurate assumption, but nevertheless, an assumption. And here you see, so in work table here, we got served black porcelain, which shows you again how incredibly colorful marquetry was, and it was referred to as painting in wood. That was a title given to these to marquetry at the time. Here we converted 2 clocks, 2 carillons. One plays 13 melodies, one plays 14 melodies, and it was simply bearing down. When you have these cylinders, it's like a cylinder. You have a cylinder with pins inserted. As the cylinder turns around, different pins lift different hammers. These hammers fall on different bells and you create a sound. In this case, you could create a melody, and then every hour that cylinder moves on for 1 millimeter. And so you have different pins lifting different hammers, and you have a distorted melody, and it gets further distorted. So over time, these pins run down and they get worn and abraded away. And what was commonly done, they would go along and actually take these pins out, re-drill it slightly bigger and insert slightly bigger pins. And obviously in time you would run out of space. And when we realized we have that problem and it's very worn down, we stopped the clocks, and the only way would have been the clocks would have been silenced forever. We did a master recording of both of these catalog of these melodies, so of these 14 and 13 melodies. And then actually the idea came, or could we actually play them by the clock? Because the movement here on the clock itself, as a going train, and here's a going train, and striking of the clock itself was absolutely fine. So what we ended up is actually making a device, developing a device with some amazing sound engineer who basically helped us along fantastically well to do that. And yeah, we ended up with having a device which now sits in the clock above the carrion, so nothing has been removed, all there exactly where it should be. It's just wound down, so to say. And this device sits on top of it, has an optical micro switch. There's not even a physical connection to the old clock, so to say, other than this device just sitting inside it. And now it plays exactly the melodies activated by the clock itself, just how it would have been originally. And the sound is undistinguishable from the original. We have here the Kyoto Cabinets. We got a small but nevertheless very important collection of Juergen lacquer, being the main material that's been used. It's from a tree, resin of a tree, and the details of these are incredible. And that's, you know, the Kyoto cabinets on the inside, they're fantastic. Obviously, they're only displayed closed, except if we open them for Open Furniture Month, but generally they're closed. And that's from our chest of drawer, which is upstairs, which is fantastic. You have to come along and see it. And here I just want to see, that is what Juergen oil looks like, or Juergen, when it's just extracted from a tree. That's a tree. Again, it's a long story to cut it to the bare minimum. Juergen lacquer is a contact poison, and you can get some quite fanciful eczema and yeah, not very pleasant, but not deadly. But it's not great, and it's an amazing material. It's incredibly aggressive. If you have a sable brush, it would deteriorate within seconds, so to say. You have rat hair brushes, you have human hair brushes, and they're fantastic. It's an amazing material. It never sets, so you can work on it and correct mistakes and go over and over and over again. And it only sets or polymerizes when you set it into Vzhůru, into a furrow, which is basically a cabinet which you wipe out with water. You increase the relative humidity, so it sets with high humidity. As soon as you increase the high humidity, Juergen lacquer will set. The problem is it's got amazing properties if it's not damaged, when it's not damaged. And the only cause which causes damage is light, and light causes irreparable damage to it. And in Japan or in Asia, generally speaking, they would reintroduce Juergen lacquer called the Vzhůru Juergen, which is basically thinned, diluted Juergen lacquer. And they would reapply that, and you basically restore the constitution, so to say, of your Juergen lacquer. And in the West, they couldn't do that. They were, in any case, unaware of it and unaware of the problems. They would apply any film forming material, any varnish, waxes, whatever they found in the kitchen cupboard, and to get that gloss back again, because that would be noticeable. It's the gloss would go. So very important to realize that Juergen lacquer is incredible light sensitive. Now we go to the last part of the presentation. I know it has been erased, and I now have to drink a little sip. So what you see here is a Wallace collection at night, but at least at some nights, which I said, and to raise money for our collection, we have to rent out the collection. And I don't see that at all as a problem. You know, as a conservator, even I'm very conservative in a way, I don't see this as a problem, because it's in the spirit of Richard Wallace. He had this house converted to entertain. He would invite like-minded guests. He would throw parties, but obviously in very civilized manners, but still people would have a cigar or two and walk around and basically look at the artwork. And that was the idea of Richard Wallace. So in a way, it's in the spirit of Richard Wallace. And if it's properly organized and properly done, it's not a problem. It really isn't a problem. And it actually raises money for us, and we can keep the doors free. Wallace Collection is a national museum and free of charge. So anyone can enter free of charge. And yeah, it worked well before Corona, but now obviously not anymore, but we see what happens, so what we can do. But yeah, just to basically show that it's a very important aspect to actually, if people are willing to pay a lot of money for it, why not? Why not? And it's properly organized, not a problem, not a problem. What is more of a problem, which is the next slide, and which is the last part of my talk, which is again thought-provoking, is where do we stand on CO2? All our energy, all the energy of the Wallace Collection, which we use some £250,000 a year on just energy consumption, so electricity and gas, and vast majority, actually 220,000 is just electricity. And most of that energy is produced, traditionally at least, with fossil fuels. Few nuclear reactors as well, but the vast majority of our primarily energy consumption is based on fossil fuels. The whole economy, the whole world is based on fossil fuels. That's how it's been, which give us a lot of benefits, as we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing, but also a lot of disadvantages, like, for example, a huge CO2 increase in the atmosphere, and obviously very high bills. And we basically done a lot of work here in the Wallace Collection to actually reduce our bills, and we have solar panels, we have PV solar on the roof of the Wallace Collection. Very few, but nevertheless, it's a step in the right direction. All our electricity comes from renewable only suppliers. So we've done lots in this department, but much more can be done. And I just want to bring it home how long we had these issues. And I think people forget completely the side of it and think, oh, well, it's just something very new and something, you know, I mean, here we got in 1912, that is a newspaper article from 1912, outlining the problems we may find. It says in a few centuries, but obviously it's a bit quicker than that. And here again, we got Jimmy Carter, if we don't act quickly. So that's like, I took that screenshot. It's from 1977. It's all about energy and about climate change, but really climate change, the word was coined by, you wouldn't expect that, by Margaret Thatcher, so to say, and it wasn't really her idea, but it became all of a sudden mainstream. When Margaret Thatcher addressed the United Nations in 1989, that's quite a few years back, she spoke about climate change again and again, and the threat to humanity. And it's absolutely amazing how it actually made all of a sudden went to mainstream. From being only sort of left-wing tree huggers, it became mainstream. And that is great. Not that she did anything about it, but in a way, it helped to bring the issue to a wider audience. And yeah, my point is, what is the point of creating the most important, the most perfect internal environment, creating the perfect environment for our art object by destroying our own habitat? And I think that picture here of this little church here in the middle of flooded fields is yet the best idea. I mean, what's the point of now having an altarpiece, paper scrolls, whatever, in a most imperfect environment when everything out here is going completely wrong? And all of these newspaper cuttings are just within the last 2 years. Now, fortunately, we are in a position we can do many things and we can buy them off the shelf. So we don't have to wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow is here now. We have incredible LED filament technology. We have LED lights which really are very close to daylight, much better than early LED. No question about that. And we can insulate, we can do induction cooking, we can have here air-to-air source heat pumps, we have combined heat power source. So we have all of these various technologies here ready to go, because the biggest thing is saving energy. That's the energy we don't produce in any formal way. That is the best energy, because whenever you produce energy, you're going to annoy somebody. The point is, try to reduce that amount of energy, try to reduce the energy hunger. But energy needs to come, and it can come from renewables. Renewables work all around the world. They're amazing, and despite the bad press or no bad press, you know, despite all the obstacles being put into renewable energy and the path of renewable energy, so to say, they're done incredibly well, in an incredible hostile environment, you know, and so you can see actually how renewable push down the consumption of coal and lignite in Germany. In coal and lignite, mining in Germany and other countries is a sin. It's a gravely sin. I mean, honestly, it is not necessary, absolutely not necessary. Renewables work. The only thing is you have to scale it up, and you can balance the grid with renewable. And again, I can talk an hour on just that subject very easily. And I show you how many times that's like energy consumption over a period in Germany. These blue lines going down here, if you could see the slide bigger, show you when the energy cost went into negative territory, big time, because we had so much electricity that we had to sort of sell it to Austria at a high cost. And it's simply done because the feed-in tariff, also how these companies get paid, is based on the energy they're just barely put into the grid, rather than actually being paid for balancing the grid. And like you have hydro electricity, and you have like what they call here in England the electric mountain in Wales, where you basically have energy storage and you open it up as soon as there's a high energy demand. You can do exactly the same with wind and solar. There's no one stopping you and actually turning the wind turbine off and only having it when you really need to, which actually would also reduce wear and tear. But it's all in the right direction. And here, one of the last slides here, I just want to show you these last headlines here. And it's just like how many companies have pledged now, companies, institutions, counties pledged to be carbon neutral by 2030. So just in 10 years' time. And that's possible because simply if you look at the evidence, if you look what renewables produced in the last few years, how much employment they have created, yeah, and how much cheaper they have become, it's completely obvious that's the way to go, yeah. But obviously there is a lot of lobbying going on, because the energy density of renewable cannot beat the energy density of nuclear or fossil fuel. The energy density is just ginormous. And renewables can't compete with that. It's impossible because we are surrounded by energy, but to actually harvest that in a way to give it and turn it into usable energy is very difficult. So we mustn't forget that. So that's why obviously drilling a hole in the ground and just extracting a bit of oil, you can't beat that. You need less people to work. Nuclear is even more extreme. You have enormous energy density there, and you just need to employ a few people, and then you distribute, and you can pay yourself a salary which is insane, and then you still charge a fortune to your clients. Whereas renewables, you need to employ many more people, and you have to introduce energy democracy in a way, because income and the generation and income is shared by many rather than just a few. But it's all part of the process, and we're getting there. Last slide. Before I thank everyone, it's been a race, and I'm doing just about okay with my time. But just to show you this to infinity and beyond, it's obviously not from this movie, but just to give an idea of Space Odyssey, of this room here. It's one of the last scenes in the last 20 minutes, and you can actually see, well, what I consider is a Wallace collection. And what you can see is actually very much like Boucher, Watteau, Fragonard paintings, Fragonard, Boucher, Watteau, sorry. And the main thing here is a roll top desk by Riesner. Now that may not be by Riesner, that one here, but it depicts one by Riesner. The original piece is actually in Buckingham Palace, owned by the Queen, and that is very much exactly one like that model in white. And with this one, I'll leave you. I'd like to thank all of these people here, and obviously thanking you for organizing that. And I hope to see you in the near future in person. Thank you very much.